December 3rd, 1984. It was an ordinary winter night in Bhopal, India. Families had finished dinner, children had fallen asleep, workers were ending their shifts. Nobody knew that within a few hours, an invisible killer would descend upon the city. No explosions, no warning sirens, no earthquake, no flood, just a cloud. A cloud so deadly that it would turn a sleeping city into a mass grave before sunrise. What happened in Bhopal that night would become one of the worst industrial disasters in human history. And the scars it left behind still have not healed. This is the story of negligence, the story of suffering, the story of environmental destruction, and the story of a law born from tragedy. Chapter 1: The City and the Factory. In the heart of Bhopal stood a pesticide manufacturing plant owned by Union Carbide India Limited. The factory produced chemicals intended to improve agricultural productivity. But hidden inside its storage tanks was a substance known as Methyl Isocyanate, or MIC. MIC was highly toxic. Even small amounts could cause severe injury. Yet thousands of people lived just a few hundred meters from the facility. Entire neighborhoods grew around the plant. Families trusted that those operating the factory knew what they were doing. Unfortunately, that trust would prove fatal. By the early 1980s, the plant was struggling financially. Cost-cutting measures became common, maintenance declined, safety systems deteriorated, critical warnings were ignored, and slowly disaster began taking shape. Chapter 2: The Night of Death. Shortly before midnight on December 2nd, water entered a storage tank containing more than 40 tons of MIC. The result was catastrophic. A violent chemical reaction began inside the tank. Temperature soared, pressure built rapidly. Workers watched helplessly as the situation spiraled out of control. Several safety mechanisms that should have prevented disaster were either malfunctioning, switched off, or ineffective. Then came the moment that changed everything. A massive quantity of toxic gas escaped into the night air. The wind carried the poison directly toward nearby communities. People woke up coughing, their eyes burned as if a fire had been poured into them. Breathing became agony. Mothers grabbed children and ran into the streets. Many never made it far. Some collapsed in their homes. Others died on sidewalks. Entire families were found together, frozen in their final moments. Hospitals quickly became overwhelmed. Doctors had no idea exactly what gas had leaked. There were no established treatment protocols, no emergency plans, no preparation, only chaos. By sunrise, thousands were dead. And many more were beginning a lifetime of suffering. Chapter 3: The Human Cost. The tragedy did not end when the gas dispersed. For survivors, it had only begun. Many developed chronic respiratory diseases. Others suffered permanent eye damage. Neurological disorders became common. Women reported reproductive complications. Children born years later continued to face health challenges linked by many researchers and activists to toxic exposure. But statistics cannot fully capture the scale of human suffering. Behind every number was a person, a father who never returned home, a mother searching for her child in a crowded hospital, a family destroyed in a single night. Decades later, survivors would still be fighting for adequate health care, compensation, and justice. For many, the disaster never truly ended. Chapter 4. The Environmental Disaster. The toxic cloud may have disappeared within days. The environmental consequences did not. Chemical waste remained inside the abandoned factory. Concerns grew over contamination of surrounding soil and groundwater. Residents living near the site feared that pollution had become part of everyday life. The Bhopal disaster revealed something the world could no longer ignore. Environmental damage is rarely temporary. It can outlive headlines. It can outlive governments, and sometimes it can outlive generations. Bhopal became a symbol of what happens when industrial development advances faster than environmental responsibility. Chapter 5. A law born from tragedy. The disaster shocked India. It also exposed a dangerous truth. The country's environmental laws were fragmented and inadequate for handling industrial hazards of this scale. The response came in 1986. The Government of India enacted the Environment Protection Act. Often described as India's umbrella environmental legislation, the Act granted sweeping powers to regulate pollution, control hazardous substances, inspect industries, and shut down facilities violating environmental standards. The law represented a promise that Bhopal would never happen again. New rules followed, hazardous chemical regulations were strengthened, environmental clearances became more rigorous, industrial safety received greater attention. On paper, India now possessed one of its strongest environmental frameworks. But a difficult question remained. Would the law be enough? Chapter 6. Has the Act succeeded? The answer is complicated. The Environment Protection Act transformed environmental governance in India. It gave regulators unprecedented authority. It helped establish stricter pollution standards. It strengthened environmental institutions. And it provided courts with powerful legal tools. Yet, enforcement remains a challenge. Industrial accidents have not disappeared. Pollution continues to affect millions. Regulatory agencies often face shortages of manpower and resources. Critics argue that strong laws mean little without strong implementation. Bhopal taught the world that safety cannot exist merely on paper. It must exist in practice. Every inspection, every audit, every decision, every day. Because when warnings are ignored, the consequences can be irreversible. Conclusion. More than 40 years have passed since the deadly night. The factory stands silent, but its story continues to speak. It speaks through survivors, through contaminated land, through courtrooms, through environmental laws, and through every debate about corporate responsibility and public safety. The Bhopal gas tragedy was not simply an accident. It was a preventable catastrophe, a catastrophe born from negligence. The Environment Protection Act of 1986 emerged from the ashes of that tragedy. But laws alone cannot protect people. Only accountability can, only vigilance can, only the determination to value human life above profit can. Because the true lesson of Bhopal is not about what happened in 1984. It is about whether we have learned enough to ensure it never happens again. I hope that this video made you think about the callous attitude of Union Carbide company, the innumerable deaths and the suffering of the survivors who are fighting for justice even today. Some tragedies live as long as the humanity lives. Bhopal tragedy will definitely occupy as one of the top worst accidents in the history of mankind.